I now invite you to examine item 6 on our agenda, voluntary supplementary contributions and other issues. Concerning the voluntary contributions, allow me to remind you that in accordance with Article 25.5 and 27 of our Constitution or our Convention, it is the responsibility of this committee to approve the voluntary supplementary contributions provided by state parties in addition to their annual assessed contributions. These contributions are intended for the implementation of activities that cannot be supported with the limited resources of UNESCO's regular budget. Therefore, I cannot stress enough their utmost importance for the implementation of the 2003 Convention. This item includes one other issues, which is the decision of the Executive Board at its 204th session to apply a new set of management cost rates to special accounts. I will now leave the floor to our Secretary, Mr. Curtis, to give us further details on this item. Mr. Secretary, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. In compliance and accordance with Decision 12-6, the Secretariat has been requested to report on the progress in the implementation of any voluntary supplementary contribution it may have received since its last session, and the document before you includes such a report. Under this item, a generous offer of the Government of Japan for a new voluntary supplementary contribution is also presented for possible acceptance by the committee. This item also brings to the attention of the committee the decision of the 204th session of the Executive Board in relation to the new set of management cost rates for special accounts. This decision of course also concerns the fund of the Convention, and I will explain this issue in a little more detail later on, as the committee is expected to make a recommendation in this regard to the next session of the General Assembly in 2020. Allow me first to go through the state of affairs in relation to the voluntary supplementary contributions received since the last session of the committee. As you know, at its 12th session, the committee approved 2 new funding priorities for the period 2018 to 2021. First is strengthening capacities to safeguard intangible cultural heritage and contribute to sustainable development, which is in a continuation of the efforts to extend and reach the reach of the global capacity building strategy. And number 2, the second new one which was opened, was safeguarding intangible cultural heritage in formal and non-formal education. You can see on the screen the evolution of the voluntary supplementary contributions mobilized in support of the first funding priority. The Global Capacity Building Program. The graph shows a general decline since 2012. This decline reached its lowest point this current biennium. The decrease can be mainly explained by the sharp reduction in earmarked contributions made to the fund by state parties. During the reporting period, that is the first 6 months of this year, no contributions were received for earmarked activities related to the capacity building program. This steady decline over past biennia has shown a small sign of turning around through the funds in trust arrangements. Since the beginning of the current biennium, 2 new projects have been initiated, thanks to the generous contributions made by Belgium and Flanders, in particular, to continue the project aimed at strengthening the sub-regional cooperation and national capacities in 7 southern African countries, as well as by Japan to strengthen national capacities for the effective implementation of the 2003 Convention in Lebanon. Although some donors have expressed an informal interest, no contributions have been received yet to support the second funding priority, which concerns intangible cultural heritage in education. Given this somewhat worrying situation, the committee may wish to encourage donors to support the 2 funding priorities through earmarked voluntary contributions to the ICH fund. And the situation is unfortunately no better when it comes to the support for the human resources of the Secretariat through voluntary contributions. During its last session, the General Assembly approved the creation of a new team, as I mentioned earlier, with the purpose of expanding and improving the reach of international assistance mechanism. And notwithstanding this very encouraging development, support for the human resources of the Secretariat through voluntary contribution remains essential in order to keep up with the volume of statutory obligations of the Convention. The team being recruited will alleviate only a small part of the increasing workload of the Secretariat, and this is also because it will mainly focus its initial efforts on tasks that are not being currently assumed by the Secretariat. These include effective implementation and monitoring systems for individual projects after the granting of international assistance funds. For this reason, once more, the Committee may wish to further encourage donors to make new voluntary contributions to the sub-fund. In this regard, since the last session of the Committee, the sub-fund has received a total of $64,917, thanks to generous contributions made by the governments of the People's Republic of China, Finland, Kazakhstan, and Montenegro. As I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, I am happy to transmit the wish of the Government of Japan to further support the 2003 Convention through a voluntary supplementary contribution to the ICH Fund. You will recall that the Committee at its 12th session acknowledged the need to convene an open-ended intergovernmental working group to reflect inter alia on the procedures for the removal of an element from a list and the transfer from one list to another, the nature and purposes of the lists and the register established under the Convention, and the relevance of various criteria for each of these mechanisms. The General Assembly at its 7th session earlier this year further underlined this need. It is expected that the results of the reflection will lead to the amendments of the operational directives with an improved and well thought out renewed mechanism for listings under the Convention. I would like to highlight that the decision of the Committee is set broadly to discuss all relevant issues related to the listing mechanisms, as the word indeed inter alia suggests. Without wanting to preempt what the Committee will discuss later this week, the Secretariat considers that other aspects of the listing mechanisms might also be included in this reflection. For example, the issues concerning the follow-up of inscribed elements on the list of the Convention that will be addressed under item 9. The intention of the Government of Japan, as expressed to the Secretariat, is to use this contribution to organize a preliminary meeting of experts in 2019 in order to prepare for an open-ended intergovernmental working group meeting which provisionally would be held in 2021. Subject to the acceptance of the Committee on this offer, we are more or less confident that a meeting of experts can be organized next year, and the remaining amount will be used to support the organization of the open-ended working group, and that is why it is indicated provisionally for 2021. The Secretariat will seek additional resources if necessary to convene that working group. For now, the Committee is asked to approve the generous offer of the Government of Japan, and details of which can be found in Annex 2 to this document. In the meantime, in order to explain some of the timing, I'd like to take you through a timeline of the other meetings that will be taking place next year. As you can see on the screen, the reflection will start with a meeting of experts in 2019. The outcome of this meeting should be reported to the 14th session of the Committee. The 8th session of the General Assembly and the 15th session of the Committee meeting would be further occasions to discuss the reflection before convening a meeting of the open-ended intergovernmental working group. The results of the working group could then be brought to the 16th session to agree on the amendments to the operational directives to be recommended to the General Assembly. Finally, at the 9th session of the General Assembly may adopt the amendments of the operational directives. The combination of a meeting of experts and the open-ended intergovernmental working group is a modality that proved very useful when developing the overall results framework. The timeline is indeed a bit long, but this is because of the complex nature of the reflection covering multiple issues and because of a number of other thematic or statutory meetings that have already been asked to take place. For example, the Secretariat will be organizing 2 additional meetings next year, one on the participation of accredited NGOs in the implementation of the Convention, and the other on intangible cultural heritages in emergencies, as per decisions 12-17 and 13-2 Bureau 3 respectively. It will also be difficult to foresee an open-ended working group in 2020 because that is a year where the GA will take place. I would like to stress once again the complex and somewhat sensitive nature of this reflection, so the Secretariat considers it important to include many opportunities for discussions at the intergovernmental level. The current plans allows a careful preparation towards the open-ended intergovernmental working group. If I may, I'll move on now to the issue of the management cost rates. The Executive Board at its 204th session decided to approve a new set of management cost rates, which you can now see on the screens. Before going into detail with the decision, let me first recall the different kinds of contributions that compose the ICH Fund. On the one hand, the Fund receives annual assessed contributions as defined by Article 26 of the Convention, which have so far benefited from a special management cost rate derogation of 0%. This derogation was exceptionally granted by the Director General, not only to the ICH Fund, but also to comparable special accounts, such as the World Heritage Fund. On the other hand, the Fund may also receive voluntary contributions as those made by state parties in support to earmarked activities or the sub-fund. These voluntary contributions were up to now subject to a standard management cost rate of 10%. Coming back to the decision taken by the Executive Board, multi-donor special accounts should now be subject to a new rate of 7% instead of the previous standard rate of 10%. Given the different regimes of management cost rates affecting the contributions received by the Fund, this decision would have two different impacts on it. Voluntary contributions made by state parties will now benefit from a lower rate, from 10% to 7%. However, for the assessed contributions to the Fund, the situation is different, because the application of the decision taken by the Executive Board would mean an increase in the rate from 0% to 7%. Given the special derogation granted by the Director General, the Executive Board recognized the need to undertake consultations with the governing bodies of the 2003 Convention prior to any potential implementation of this decision. This same exception was made with the 1972 Convention, which committee, during its last session held in Bahrain, recommended not to apply the new management cost rate in relation to assessed contributions. Hence, this committee is asked to make a recommendation in this regard to the next session of the General Assembly to be held in June 2020. If a 7% rate is applied on the current plan of expenditure, which is $9,590,922, approved by the 7GA, $671,364 United States dollars would have to be allocated as management costs. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for your clear presentation. Dear members, allow me to first express my sincere gratitude to those who generously provided support to the Convention and its Secretariat since our last session. These are namely Belgium and Flanders, the People's Republic of China, Finland, Japan, Kazakhstan, Montenegro, and Singapore. At the same time, from Mr. Curtis' presentation, we understand that the situation of voluntary contributions continues to be extremely worrying. This is something that requires our attention, and we are asked to take a decision on two issues. First, accept the generous offer for a new voluntary supplementary contribution made by the government of Japan, and secondly, discuss the potential modification of the current management cost rate that applies to the Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund. I will now open the floor for your kind reflections on this item. I see Japan, Palestine. Can we start with Japan, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. As kindly introduced by the Secretariat and as described in Annex 2 of the document of this item, Japan has decided to make voluntary contribution to the ICH Fund for organizing an expert meeting and for supporting a meeting of the open-ended intergovernmental working group with a view to reflecting and exploring ways for improvement of the current mechanisms and procedures of the 2003 Convention. Mr. Chair, let me explain why we believe the reflection is necessary. Until today, this committee and the General Assembly have repeatedly discussed about improvement of the mechanisms and the procedures of the Convention. Such exercise has achieved certain results, such as the revision of the form of nomination file, the decision to reform the periodic reporting mechanism, and so on. However, the situation surrounding the Convention is dramatically changing. The number of state parties has increased from 30 to 178 over the past 15 years since the adoption of the Convention. The raison d'etre of the Convention is getting more widely accepted and recognized, but expectations and demand from state parties are also getting bigger and stronger. Against this background, Japan proposes to start the reflection on the mechanisms and procedures of the Convention so as to meet the demand of the day while respecting and maintaining the original spirit and design of the Convention. Mr. Chair, now I'd like to refer to the Article 2 of the Convention, which provides the definition of the intangible cultural heritage as certain types or forms of cultural elements that communities, groups, and in some cases, individuals recognize as part of their cultural heritage. This provision highlights the unique character of the ICH definition, which does not refer to the outstanding universal value, OUV, that is essential requirement for the inscription of the World Heritage. Thus, what is required for the evaluation process of ICH is to examine and confirm if the nominated elements meet these criteria rather than to evaluate and determine cultural values of the nominated element, let alone the OUV. This is a core part of the Convention, which we believe is still relevant and should be maintained. On the other hand, we should re-examine and update the evaluation process of the ICH, taking account of the demand of the day. For example, we have maintained the practice that the evaluation body evaluates nominated elements solely based on the information and the facts contained in the files. But this could be beneficial for them to refer to resources other than the files, such as those available on the internet, like YouTube, especially when the nominator requests to the body to do so. This will rather help the evaluation body understand better whether the nominated element meet criteria, and thus will help decrease the number of unnecessary referrals. Based on the above-mentioned points, Japan suggests to examine the following topics in the expert meeting. 1. Nature and purpose of the list. 2. Forthcoming evaluation process. 3. Procedures for the removal of an element from a list and the transfer from one list to the other. 4. Issues concerning the follow-up of the inscribed elements on the list of the Convention. Mr. Chair, Japan is ready to actively contribute to the reflection process of the Convention, together with all other committee member states and state parties to the Convention and the Secretariat. I thank you very much.
To Japan. May I now invite Palestine to share with us his views?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like first to warmly thank Japan as well as all the donors for the extra budgetary fund of this convention. And we notice in the report and in the decision that there is a decline in this extra budgetary fund that is allocated for the two priorities that has been identified that we see in the report about the capacity building principally and sustainable development and the ICH through education. Well, my question to the Secretariat, in case and only in case if this decline continues and only if there is no extra budgetary fund, could it be possible to have these activities on the regular fund? This is the first question. Secondly, thank you for the report, very clear report, but I have some concern about the figure that you showed for the timeline. We understand that the next step will be the reflection meeting in Japan in 2019. And then the General Assembly, and after that, after the 14th COM, there will be the ad hoc working group. And in the timeline that you showed, if we can see it again, there is no mention about the group between the two sessions. What about it? Could you please explain and put it back on the screen? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, let us in the meantime take a few more views. I have on my list now Colombia, Azerbaijan, Philippines, Netherlands, and Armenia. Colombia, please. No. Okay, no, Armenia, no. We have Colombia.
Gracias, presidente. En primer lugar, agradecer las contribuciones de Holanda, China, Finlandia, Kazajstán y Montenegro al Fondo de Patrimonio Cultural Inmaterial. Y de igual manera, presidente, agradecer al gobierno del Japón por propiciar este diálogo que tiene que ver con un asunto estructural de la Convención de 2003. Agradecer que también este diálogo vaya a tener lugar en París, en la sede de la UNESCO, lo que va a facilitar aún más la interlocución de todos los Estados miembros de la organización. Y por el otro lado, presidente, algunos aspectos en materia, en relación con el reporte de la Secretaría.
Bueno, me voy a apagar aquí un poquito. Pues como país quisiéramos resaltar la importancia de buscar fondos para seguir fomentando esta iniciativa sobre la salvaguardia del patrimonio cultural inmaterial en la educación formal y no formal. En este sentido, Colombia está 100% comprometido con esta iniciativa de la Secretaría, pues consideramos que la alianza entre patrimonio cultural inmaterial y educación genera desarrollo sostenible, pero genera también procesos sociales y económicos sostenibles para las comunidades en su propia lógica. Y en ese sentido también quisiésemos ofrecer al comité nuestra experiencia y nuestras metodologías en educación terciaria y en las escuelas taller, que han sido una estrategia a través de la cual hemos logrado generar salvaguardia de oficios tradicionales y también fomentar la salvaguardia de conocimientos tradicionales de las comunidades para las poblaciones vulnerables y para generar oportunidades de vida en diferentes territorios de Colombia. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Colombia. Now we are going to hear Azerbaijan.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Azerbaijan would like to thank the Secretariat for the detailed report on the contribution to the ICH Fund. We would like to join the other delegations in expressing its full appreciation of the countries who have provided support to the implementation of the Convention since the committee's last session. We also would like to thank the government of Japan for having provided the contribution to the ICH Fund, for launching these very important reflection procedures on the removal of the element from the list and transfer from the another list, as well as on the nature and purposes of the list and the register established under the Convention. Our delegation is confident that this work will help to clarify multiple questions linked to the status of the elements inscribed and purposes of the inscription, and as well as we would like to confirm our active participation in this reflection process. My delegation would like also to share the concerns with the decline of the extra budgetary resources to the capacity building strategy of the Secretariat, which we believe is one of the instrumental ways to better implement the convention. Azerbaijan is one of the supporters of the Secretariat for the capacity building projects, and we believe that this is a unique system which provides the state parties a better understanding of the convention and serves for the implementation, efficient implementation of the convention. When it comes to the issue that we have been following through the work of the UNESCO, the UNESCO Executive Board, the management cost rates, which was decided to be applied at 7%. In this regard, our delegation has a practical question to the Secretariat. Considering the decision of the 2004 decision of the board to allow the governing bodies to undertake necessary consultations with the committee, we wonder if any consultation is planned to be happen between the sessions of the committee, and if so, what will be the timing and format of such consultations? I thank you very much.
Thank you, Azerbaijan. May I now request Philippines?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In a way similar to the statement made by the Palestinian delegation, our only comment is on the timeline of the reflection on the listing mechanisms. We note the preparatory experts meeting supported by Japan is scheduled in 2019, which is good. But the open-ended intergovernmental working group on the matter is proposed only for 2021, which is 3 years from now. Based on the timeline, any suggested amendments to the operational directives would only be taken up by the General Assembly in 2022, which again seems quite a long time, 4 years down the road, when addressing these matters are quite urgent. In this regard, we think that the General Assembly in 2020 should be utilized to adopt amendments to the operational directives that can improve the system, especially if they were widely supported. It may thus be useful to hold an initial meeting of the Intergovernmental Working Group in 2020. Another meeting would be held in 2021 and or 2022 as necessary to continue the process of reform. And cognizant of the comments made by the Secretariat on the complexities, if we maintain the suggested timeline, hence keeping in place the present system until 2022, then we urge that the dialogue procedure be adopted soonest. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Philippines. May I now request Netherlands to comment, and thereafter we'll hear the views of the Secretary on all these issues. Netherlands, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. The Netherlands would like to thank Japan for its generous contribution, and we would like to express our interest to participate in the process of reform where possible. We share the concerns already expressed and find the serious decline in earmarked voluntary contributions in the past years worrying. The Netherlands is a strong supporter of the Global Capacity Building Programme because we believe it represents the essence of the Convention, since it contributes to safeguarding on all levels, communities, NGOs, and state parties. These earmarked voluntary contributions can be very effective when the Secretariat is able to match needs and resources. This way, capacity building programs can cater to the specific needs of regions and communities. The Netherlands would like to underscore paragraph 8 in draft decision 6, in which contributors are encouraged to support the achievement of the goals set out in the 2 funding priorities through earmarked voluntary contributions to the fund. In the past years, the Netherlands has financed capacity building in Suriname and the Dutch Caribbean islands. Since that project is almost ended, we now have the intention to start contributing to the safeguarding of ICH in formal and informal education. Education on all levels is of the utmost importance in the safeguarding of ICH. The Ministry of Education, Culture and Science in the Netherlands is currently working on a new national curriculum. The ICH experts within the ministry are working on the implementation of ICH in this new curriculum. My delegation emphasizes the importance of using bottom-up approaches that involve community members and NGOs. We also believe young people can greatly contribute to safeguarding intangible heritage. There are good examples of this already. In several national committees, for instance, young people are active in involving other young people in the values of safeguarding heritage through peer-to-peer education. The Netherlands wonders if these initiatives could be connected to each other through the UNESCO Associated School Network to work more globally on awareness raising and ways to safeguard ICH. In general, we wonder if somehow more insight can be provided in the different initiatives in education and ICH, since a lot of member states are active on this subject and we could learn from each other's good examples. Thank you.
Thank you, Netherland. May I ask Mr. Secretary to respond on the few issues which have been raised?
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I understand. I'll try to elucidate some of the questions we had. There was 2 questions concerning the timeline. There was also a question concerning regular program use from Palestine, a question concerning ASP.NET from the Netherlands. And I think those covers the questions. Oh, and from Azerbaijan, the question about the management costs. Allow me to start with the timeline, and we do understand there are 2 factors. First of all is whether the issues surrounding the inscription process need to be fully reformed comprehensively and holistically, or whether it's taken a staged approach in order to simply be able to do the work required. And I also remind that we have ongoing requests to do, including those on the reform of the ICH, of the NGO accreditation system, on the development of guidelines for ICH in emergencies, in particular scheduled to happen next year. That gives us 3 expert meetings next year. And I remind you, in General Assembly years, we need to organize both a committee meeting and a General Assembly anyway. So part of the problem really is the calendar year and the number of statutory meetings we are already required to organize. So if we look at this timeline, and then the other part is to consider that more funding may come towards this process. At the moment, we have the very generous offer as it stands, but we do hope that there might be further sources of funding to have more consultations on this process. So the plan is to have, as I said, by next year, given that we have to do also an expert meeting on the ICH accreditation and an expert meeting on the situation of intangible cultural heritage in emergencies. We feel our capacity allows us to plan from this, and I'm not only talking about budget capacity, I'm just talking about available time, to hold the first meeting in September next year, okay? Which means we can only give a progress report at the 14Com. Now, the committees are themselves consultation processes. The idea of presenting an item to the committee is also to get further feedback from committee members. So we consider the committee meetings as part of the intergovernmental consultation process in themselves. So that means the 14Com, and it goes quite quickly, brings us to the end of next year, which is 1 year from now. And that, now, the question is whether we can go straight from the only possibility I could see was whether the expert meeting was supposed to give already planned operational directive amendments. We don't feel it's realistic. We are worried it would be rushed and there wouldn't be enough consultation unless we drop our other requirements, which are the ICH in situations of emergencies and the renewal of the accreditation system of the NGOs and reflection on their engagement. But we simply cannot keep all of these going and keep adding on to it without more time. So if something gets dropped, then there may be possibilities, but I do think that there is a question of things. So allow me please to finish through the timeline. This brings us to the June 2020, which is the next GA. To imagine the entire revision by then is, in my opinion, quite unrealistic. The transfer of an element is a sensitive issue, the follow-up to the elements, the dialogue process, the questions on how long a referral might need before it can come back for a re-examination. These are all complex questions, and if we rush them, they may not. The idea, I hope, is 15 years into the convention that we reform the convention, that it engages positively with the next 15 to 20 years, and that we are not in a stage of constantly trying to fix bit by bit issues, but to have a comprehensive and integral reform. So if we go then to the GA becomes a further broader consultation process to sense all state parties and their senses on it, since it is the GA that has the authority over these issues, and the GA gives the opportunity for all 178 state parties to discuss, which we then effectively reinitiate on another 2-year period after that. So it's not quite 4 years, it's 3 years and a few months. The one option, if it was to be quicker, could be to change at the 20 GA the title of the Intergovernmental Working Group to a special session of the General Assembly, but that would be one less intergovernmental reflection. And that requires also other complications. So to do it before 21 is really just not feasible given the resources, not only of ours, all the demands we have to do, because what this is not showing is these other processes the committee has asked us to do. If the committee is willing to withdraw other processes, suspend them, there might be a possibility, but there's also the question of financing, because we don't have a fully funded yet intergovernmental, the open-ended working group. By that stage, we do hope to have so. Okay. This is this issue. I have some other questions I need to get to. Firstly, on the regular program funding for those two funding priorities, and I did hear a comment that they're both declining, which is not quite the case. One is a new funding priority, so it hasn't declined because it needs to start. The other is in serious decline, and we acknowledge that part of the issue may have been the accumulation of the fund, of the international assistance mechanism, which did make it more difficult to attract funding when there is unused money in the fund. That trend seems to be reversed, and indeed we are seeing quite an encouraging use of the fund for capacity building projects. But of course we expect the fund to start decreasing quickly, and there is a severe risk that if the fund gets decreased through the improved access to the IA mechanism, we will find ourselves in a gap. And I think the next 18 months will be critical in that sense, where there will be no possible funding. Now RP, we are already giving RP, but RP is hardly enough. We have what we call the incompressible costs, which are related to the organization of the statutory meetings of the convention, which by far take up the most of the regular program money available. The rest is given to field officers, but you are well aware that they are highly limited. And as I reported early on, the RP money for this biennium has already been allocated to these funding priorities, but only as, in a sense, seed money to try to mobilize more extra budgetary resources. Concerning the question from Azerbaijan, indeed, it is the General Assembly that will have to make the decision on this for referral back. So this is the first consultation step. We have between now and the next committee may make a recommendation to the General Assembly of state parties. If there is a request for electronic or meeting consultation, we would please urge it to keep low-cost consultation. We are quite happy to do that, and there could be a consultation amongst all states. We could do an email consultation, for example. Perhaps we can think about this and come back in order to get an idea on whether to apply the 7% also to the assessed contributions of the fund. And then for the Netherlands, mentioned the possibility of working with AASPNet. Indeed, I'm glad to say that we're just about to start an EU-funded project, which will specifically work on ICH with the AASPNet. So that's a first initiative that we'll be starting, and we're very open to looking at that possibility in other contexts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Do I have Palestine and Philippines who want to respond?
Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try to be very brief. Actually, I have a question. Maybe in order to save time and to go a little bit faster with this process, because there is a need, you know, Mr. Chair, can't we program the initiation, reflection, the meeting of experts instead of having it next year in September, which is 9 months? Could it be a little bit earlier? And this will save at least 1 year. This is the first question. Second question, don't we need immediately after the outcome of the expert meeting to have the open-ended working group in order to continue the business on this item? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Vol here, Philippines.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. We appreciate the responses of the Secretariat to our points. Similar to the distinguished delegate from Palestine, we'd just like to say we understand the constraints expressed by Mr. Curtis and the Secretariat about the scheduling. We understand that it's not easy. We definitely don't want anything to be dropped. That's the first point. But just going straight to the matter on substance is that we feel that any possible reforms, especially on dialogue, which we've already been taking up at the committee for a number of years, in the ad hoc working group as well, and in the last General Assembly. If there's some, and I wish to note that our committee next year has already decided that it would take a decision on dialogue at the 14 COM. Hence, all we want to emphasize is that at the 8th GA in June 2020, if there are any amendments, especially on dialogue that are ready, that they not be included in this overall holistic reflection, which will take so long, but perhaps they could already go through at the 8th GA. That's the sole point that we want to make and emphasize. But we do also seize the points raised by a distinguished colleague from Palestine too, which deserve merit as well. Thank you.
Philippines. Can we hear the views of the Secretary on that issue?
I hear two different issues, and one is concerning dialogue and one is concerning the overall reform. And I would say it's not just that it's not easy, it's just not possible to do all three at the same time. The reflection on NGOs, the development of the things, it's not just a question of funding, it's just a question of time. If we were to go immediately from the expert meeting to the open-ended working group, we would not have had a chance for a level of consultation with the committee. The committee we see as an important consultative process in this, you see. So whether it's in September or May, the point is it comes back to the committee once after the experts before, as we did for the overall results framework. And if I may, there was some concern in the whole process with the overall, whether there was enough inclusiveness, whether there was enough consultation. And by taking that step, we were able to bring together a consensus by the time it came to the GA. And it is my opinion that it would be important also to follow such processes so that we will have two oversights of the committee. We'll have a GA, we'll have 3 intergovernmental contexts. We'll have a fully reflected so that we can have a comprehensive reform. That is the proposal. So there is both a strategic approach and there is also just literally, I do not see how next year we can organize all the planned meetings we have planned, plus an expert meeting, plus an intergovernmental meeting. I think you are beginning to ask for the impossible in that sense. However, concerning the question of the Philippines, indeed, it is already on the agenda to be discussed next year. At the committee, we are well aware of this. Ideally, the dialogue, you know, we have looked very extensively last year at the calendar, and there are several questions around the dialogue. The dialogue is something we approve, but I'm not sure it would be more efficient to have a dialogue once the question of the criterion has been looked at. The question of the criterion could be a way to also review the process of evaluation. So could the committee, for instance, consider an interim measure next year for the dialogue process, not necessarily immediately a change of operational directives until the broader process? So one option might be to go to the committee and get the committee to agree, and we can come back on a dialogue reform as is, in a lighter way, in a tentative way, until we get, that could be initiated next year by the committee. And that would perhaps something for the informal working group again to work with, perhaps by working immediately with the evaluation body of this year in February rather than in September. And then, but we will still have the problem of the schedule, of the annual schedule, until the overall process is considered. Once the overall process is considered, we can build in the dialogue into that. So I'm very sympathetic to the questions of dialogue and the need to do something on them, whether it should go straight to operational directives in 22, or we could find a measure to have some kind of dialogue next year, which would carry us through until the overall reform is the question. But I do repeat, we're not trying to delay. We cannot juggle all of these things going on at the same time. We need the funding, and we need to take a staged approach so that we are doing what we hope will be a reform that will be sustainable for the next 15 or 20 years. And again, these reforms have happened in other conventions. They've happened in World Heritage, but they take time, and the point is to make it comprehensive. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Curtis. Et je vois qu'il y a Sénégal et Algérie qui voudront intervenir. Ok, Sénégal, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Pour ceux qui, parmi nous, avaient eu l'opportunité de prendre part au groupe de travail à composition non limitée à Chengdu, nous avions mesuré la délicatesse de ces questions structurelles qui touchent la réforme globale. C'est des questions complexes. Et je suis d'accord, c'est vrai avec la Philippine qu'il y a urgence, mais ces questions également impliquent un processus de concertation large des membres du comité. Et pour que le comité puisse vraiment prendre des décisions, il faut que si vous voulez, ce dialogue soit élargi, qu'il y ait le temps de ce dialogue. Ces réformes sont extrêmement importantes pour l'avenir de la Convention. Ce ne sont pas, à mon avis, des réformes qui peuvent se prendre dans un délai court. Nous travaillons pour l'avenir de cette Convention, et si cela est, ça demande du temps pour être sûr que nous avons posé les actes qu'il faut pour assurer tous les mécanismes et tous les directives opérationnelles à longue durée. C'est vrai qu'il y a des urgences comme la question du dialogue, mais le comité a les ressources, toute l'intelligence de trouver peut-être en 2014 une alternative provisoire. Je ne sais pas comment je vais l'exprimer pour le moment, mais je veux dire simplement pour conclure, Monsieur le Président, que ces réformes qui touchent la Convention, elles sont structurelles, elles demandent du temps pour qu'on ne fasse pas d'erreur. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Sénégal. Et avec la permission des membres du comité, je vais maintenant demander à l'Algérie d'intervenir. Naturellement, l'Algérie est ici en tant qu'observateur.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président. Prenant la parole pour la première fois, permettez-moi de joindre ma voix à ceux qui ont remercié Maurice pour l'accueil chaleureux que nous avons reçu et vous féliciter pour votre présidence. L'accueil chaleureux, c'est l'accueil aussi de l'Afrique, la chaleur de l'Afrique qui touche les âmes et les cœurs. Et nous sommes tous ici contents d'être à Maurice. Nous souhaiterions aussi remercier le secrétariat pour tout le travail accompli et les documents de qualité qui nous ont été présentés. Je me permets de prendre la parole en tant qu'observateur aujourd'hui, ayant écouté attentivement le débat qui vient d'avoir lieu sur la réforme des directives opérationnelles et peut-être des critères. Je souhaitais juste intervenir sur le point du dialogue. Vous savez, comme cette question nous est chère, nous, Algérie, parce que nous avons été parmi les premiers à demander le dialogue quand on a été à Addis Abeba, il y a 2 sessions de cela, et nous avons aussi travaillé de manière très importante au sein du groupe de travail à composition non limitée du comité. Nous avons toujours appelé le dialogue de nos voeux et nous souhaitons que ce dialogue, comme l'a précisé le secrétariat, soit léger et opérationnel, qu'il ne rajoute pas à la charge du secrétariat et combien importante, et surtout qu'il ne complique pas le travail de l'organe d'évaluation. Toutefois, il est clair que aujourd'hui, cette idée de dialogue est établie et fait son chemin. Toutefois, je souhaiterais juste rappeler, avec votre bienveillance, Monsieur le Président, aux collègues ici présents dans le comité, que ce dialogue a déjà fait l'objet de 2 décisions, une décision du comité et une décision de l'Assemblée générale, qui a décidé de surseoir à ce dialogue jusqu'à sa prochaine session. Donc, je me demande sur si on essaie aujourd'hui d'aller installer ce dialogue, même de façon rapide, est-ce que nous n'allons pas contre nos propres règles, celles que nous avons édictées et les décisions qui ont été prises par les honorables membres du comité et surtout par l'Assemblée générale. Voilà, donc telle était ma remarque en tant qu'État observateur. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Merci beaucoup l'Algérie pour ces commentaires très pertinents et je vais maintenant demander au secrétaire s'il y a rien à ajouter. Peut-on maintenant... Vous avez quelque chose? Yes. Let us hear the Secretary first.
I'd just like to come back to the issue raised again by Azerbaijan on the management costs. Again, I remind that a decision was made in the World Heritage Committee under the World Heritage Fund not to apply to the assessed contributions. The committee is free to make that decision now, and this is a consultation process, but if you wish, we go back to next year. The draft decision in its current form is to take note. It will have to be decided by a committee before the GA, but we have planned for the committee to be the consultation process.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I now consider that it's time for us to adopt the draft decision 13.6 as shown on the screen. I suggest that we proceed paragraph by paragraph. Paragraph 1. Citing the documents that we have examined. Any objection? Adopted. Paragraph 2, recalling Article 25.5 and Chapter 2 of the operational directives. Adopted. Paragraph 3, recalling our previous decision. Adopted. Paragraph 4, commending government of Japan for its generous offer of a voluntary supplementary contribution. Adopted. Paragraph 5, accepting this generous contribution from Japan and approving its specific purpose. Yes, I hear Philippine. Yes, Philippine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Just at the end of the sentence, when we request that the Secretariat ensure its proper planning and implementation, we'd like to add, taking into account the debate at its 13th session. taking into account the debate at its 13th session, where we discussed how some of the issues could have especially dialogue, may have an interim measure, or if necessary, we think perhaps even operational directives could be ready also as well. Thank you.
We have now a draft as proposed by Philippines, or Palestine has...
Just to support the amendment made by Philippines. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Yes, Senegal.
Cet amendement, Monsieur le Président.
We are approving this paragraph with the amendments proposed and seconded by 2 members. Adopted as amended. Paragraph 6. Taking note that no supplementary voluntary contribution to the fund have yet been received. In line with the 2 funding priorities, and expressing its concern in this regard. I think that we all share the same preoccupation. Adopted. Paragraph 7. I suppose the committee is happy to thank all the generous donors that supported the convention since its last session. Adopted. Paragraph 8. To encourage state parties to further support the convention through voluntary supplementary contribution. Let me also, as chairperson, to personally encourage all donors to contribute to the fund through this mechanism, as we know about the financial situation of our convention. Are there any objections? Adopted. Paragraph 9. Regarding management cost rates. Adopted. And finally, the standard closing paragraphs. Paragraph 10, regarding progress report. at our next meeting adopted. We have now adopted each of the paragraphs, and we need to adopt the decision as a whole. I therefore declare decision 13.6 as amended adopted.